Welcome to NucleCast, the official podcast of the ANWA Deterrence Center. Each week we bring you leading nuclear deterrence experts for a lively discussion on current topics. Our host is Dr. Adam Lowther, Director of Strategic Deterrence Programs at the National Strategic Research Institute. The views of the host and the guests are their own.
Hello and welcome to another edition of NucleCast. I, of course, am your host, Adam Lowther, and today we have two of my dear friends, Mr. Jeff Crater and Mr. David Cherington, who are our guests on NucleCast. Now, you may know these fellas because they are, of course, institutions in the DC world and have been around for decades. And you may have seen them in the private sector on Capitol Hill. They've been everywhere in their time in Washington and in the defense sector. And of course, they are the founders of the ANWA Deterrence Center, the host of NucleCast. And today I've asked them on because I think it's only fair and right that we have them tell us why they started the ANWA Deterrence Center and what they're hoping to accomplish. Because as many of you know, for those of us who support the nuclear enterprise and believe in the nuclear arsenal and the role it plays in maintaining a stable strategic deterrent, we are, of course, a minority amongst the think tanks and advocacy groups in Washington. So with that, welcome to the show, Jeff and David.
Oh, thank you, Adam.
Thanks very much. Jeff, you want to start with how we got started, or you want me to? Either way.
Well, let me ask you guys a question to kick it off. And we'll have you, Jeff, we'll have you go first. So if you think back a few years to the time in which you started ANWA DC, what was it that led you to come together and start a new organization that would, advocate for, educate about the nuclear enterprise? What led to the creation of ANWA DC?
Well, I think I was, and thanks for the question, Adam. I think I was mostly influenced by what I had done in my career, whether it had been on Capitol Hill, doing oversight over U.S. Department of Energy. That was back in the late 80s, early 90s, when the Cold War had come to a close. The wall had come down, and we were in the process of dismantling everything that we had just built up over the last 40, 50 years. And it was looking at that. And then having been at Department of Energy, involved in the cleanup program, and also working with some national security issues there, and then in a career in industry with BWXT, I think that was probably the greatest exposure I had. The company BWXT had just won the Pantex and Y-12 contracts when I went to work for them in 2001. And when I saw firsthand what was happening at Pantex and Y-12, how really dilapidated were, it looked like Russia. I mean, you say that in the most negative sense, that those facilities were absolutely falling apart and had not been tended to. They didn't look like production facilities. It looked like places that needed to be knocked down and remediated. And we're doing that right now. We are modernizing, knocking down facilities and building brand new facilities, both. So I'd say that was probably the biggest influence. The second part really was having talked to staff on Capitol Hill, and David and I did a tour and just talking to a wide variety of staffers from both sides of the aisle in both chambers. We realized that there really wasn't sincere and genuine knowledge atrophy about strategic nuclear deterrence, the modernization effort. And this is probably, we're talking like 2017, 2018 timeframe that really hadn't gone off the ground yet. So we knew there was a little bit of a void there that needed to be filled.
How about you, Dave? What was the motivation for you as well?
We as we were watching some of the key champions, and with all due respect to the senators and congressmen that are there now, there were some real champions of strategic nuclear deterrence on Capitol Hill that we were seeing that had retired or were announcing that they were going to be retiring. This is again in the 2017 timeframe as we were considering standing up ANWA Deterrence Center, and it was with sort of a real concern. Well, who's going to sort of grab the mantle and be the champion to talk about these issues and really lead in this space? And one of the things we noticed from the time I had the honor to work on the staff of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and some of the champions then that were supporting a strategic nuclear deterrence, many of them had fought in World War II. I mean, there was not just on the committee, but across the Senate, there was a real changing of a generation as well on Capitol Hill. So this was part of when Jeff and I were talking about, well, who's going to identify the next champions, and maybe we can help, at least on the educational side. And so that's what led to us setting up ANWA Deterrence Center.
So as you think about sort of the breadth of organizations that are out there, and as you think about think tanks, so, you have a organization like the Heritage Foundation that they're a sort of a pro-nuke think tank in DC, and then you've got the National Institutes of Public Policy that, they primarily think about strategic deterrence. It's a relatively small group of folks that actually support and advocate for policy and spending on the nuclear enterprise and on the defense nuclear enterprise. What is it that sets ANWA Deterrence Center apart? Is it how it operates, what it advocates, what makes it different, and therefore, what is the contribution?
So we really are, Adam, a educational organization. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We don't do advocacy, but we really want to educate. And right from the beginning, we recognized that although we want to reach decision makers across the federal government, we want to reach stakeholders across the nation. One of our key focus areas is to reach members of Congress, senators, and their staff. And so, in fact, when we first were doing our first our first forums, we were doing them in person on Capitol Hill with a very specific goal of reaching those congressional staff and members, and to raise to erase some of that knowledge atrophy that Jeff had spoken about. It was only when with COVID, when we went virtual to continue to have the dialogues and the conversation, we were really able to bring in that nationwide audience, which has really been fantastic. But we've never lost sight of our focus to really make sure we're continuing to reach out and target and making sure we're available to the offices up on Capitol Hill.
So yeah,
go ahead.
I just want to say that I agree that Capitol Hill is our target audience. There's no question about that. I think that's what makes us unique. Both Dave and I worked on Capitol Hill. We both worked for House members. We both worked at the committee level. We understand the how inundated staff can be with so many things in a given day, and you may be an MLA, that's a military legislative assistant on Capitol Hill, but you may also be handling transportation issues, and you may have a stack of back in the day we had paper of postcards, say from animal rights groups or whatever. So you may be handling a wide variety of issues. So you need a concentrated way to get information in the hands of those staffers so they can understand and make good decisions for their bosses, as well as when they have to go to the floor to vote, and making sure they vote according not only to their constituency, but vote based on the facts.
So as you think about, as you mentioned Capitol Hill and this real need to educate staffers and members, so as you think about your approach to doing this, what would you say is the primary focus of ANWA and the primary way that you plan to conduct education and to make sure that this knowledge deficit that really is present throughout the country, that we work to correct that? What's your take on that, and how do you plan to rectify that problem?
Well, I think, if you tune into our forums, I try to tie it all together in a very brief amount of time, sort of a nuclear or strategic nuclear deterrence 101. So I give a little bit of history, understanding where we've come from the Manhattan Project, what the decision FDR had to make at the advice of the likes of Einstein or Edward Teller back in the day. So moving forward from that time frame to where we are today, where we have systems that are both on the warhead side, have gone through a series of life extension programs, and really trying to educate staff that why we need to modernize. And probably the most stark thing is that Russia and China have been modernizing all along for the last 2 decades, and we had to take a strategic so-called pause and focus on tactical warfare post 9/11. And it's those issues that we have gravitated to, and it's really only in the last few years is that strategic nuclear deterrence has come to the fore. And frankly, we need to focus on both. We need to focus both on the tactical side. Of course, we will always do that as a part of overall deterrent strategy, as well as the strategic piece. And I think one of the things that we do emphasize in our education process is we bring up facts like during World War II. There's estimates of anywhere from 70 million to all the way up to 150 million. A lot of those lives were lost during World War II, and it's those very dramatic and important data points that we try to emphasize that we don't want to repeat that. We need a strategic deterrent to prevent the next World War. So that's one of the larger points that we try to make.
So for those who might not be familiar, could you talk about the speaker series that you have and potentially how, because there may be a lot of folks who are unfamiliar with it, who have never, tuned in to one of these speakers. I mean, here recently you had Brigadier General Stacy Joe Husser, who was the speaker and talked about NNSA, gave a great talk. But for many folks, particularly who are outside the Beltway and may not be, linked in particularly well, they might want to listen and educate themselves. So how can they find out about this?
Yeah, we really appreciate it, Adam. And we have a very good website that has recordings. This is another one of the benefits. If you never want to wish COVID on ourselves, but if we had to have it, one of the benefits of going virtual is we've recorded most of the sessions. There's been a few that have been off the record, but we've recorded most of our virtual forums, which we host approximately somewhere between 1 and 2 every month. And those are recorded and available to watch past forums on our website. And we've covered and try to cover as part of our educational series the breadth of strategic nuclear deterrence, where we cover the what happens at the Department of Energy's NNSA, the creation of where the nuclear warheads were originally developed and now maintained and and life extended for in our systems. We have forums on the three legs of the triad. These are the delivery platforms. So it would be our submarines, our bombers, and our ICBM missiles, and now the replacement, the GBSD replacement for that, as well as NC3, the Nuclear Command, Control, and Communications. How do you keep the entire communications that's required to keep our nation safe and secure, and make sure that everything's running well on the communication side, which is perhaps one of the most important parts, and modernizing all those. So we've held sessions across all of those, and then there's other adjacent issues that still become important. We're going to do a session in the near term on hypersonics and hypersonic weapons. We've done some on some of the cyber integrity, and as well as advanced nuclear reactors that could become a energy source for running some of the facilities and so forth, and maintaining our strategic nuclear deterrent. So we really try to cover the breadth of the issue as part of our educational series.
As you think about given your breadth of experience on Capitol Hill in particular, and as you think about, with John Kyle, who was a great champion of the nuclear enterprise, with his departure, what do you see as sort of the best way to try to bring back, particularly in an environment where the Russians are threatening the use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine and against NATO, or where China is rapidly expanding its arsenal? What do you see as the best way to educate policymakers and those who fund nuclear modernization? How can we really reach their staffs and reach those members?
You got that, Jeff? You want me to go?
Sure, yeah. So we've one thing that we haven't really talked a whole lot about is that we emphasize that the whole enterprise and the modernization of it has really, since we've refocused our efforts on modernization, has been a bipartisan issue. And from President Obama to President Trump, now to President Biden, all three of those administrations have pretty much fully funded the modernization programs for our strategic nuclear deterrent. And so we think it's important to keep emphasizing that. The Secretary of Defense under President Obama, Ash Carter, said that our strategic nuclear deterrent is really the bedrock of our national security. So that is the foundation upon which we build everything else. So unless we have that bedrock in place, we start to hollow out as a military, and we start to hollow out from a deterrent standpoint. We need both. We need both the strategic weapons as well as tactical weapons. So I think it's that sort of approach that.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, David.
I apologize. I apologize for that. You mentioned Adams, Senator John Kyle, and who was truly a champion of our nation's strategic nuclear deterrence, and there were many more before him. I don't want to discount the champions that are there today. And so we've talked about a knowledge atrophy. That doesn't mean that there's not House and Senate. Both parties, there are some real knowledgeable and champions of the systems today, and part of what we're happy about is I think we're helping through some of our programs to weave some of that together and help some of that communication happen, and help some of those members and staff that aren't as well tied in have a place to come at least get some initial information, and then see how much really is available to them on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, just in terms of the bipartisan nature of this, if you look at present day, you have Senator Deb Fischer, and you say, well, that's parochial. She's got Stratcom in her state of Nebraska. But then you look to the current chairman of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee over in the Senate, and it's Angus King, and he's taken an enormous interest in making sure that we have a robust strategic nuclear deterrent. So. And then, of course, the chairman, Reed, from Rhode Island. So, you look at these Inhofe. I mean, you could go on and on. So there are the champions today that, I think we're gradually building as we start to go from modernization in its infancy to really building out the delivery systems and extending the life of our existing warheads.
This episode of NucleCast is brought to you by the ANWA Deterrence Center, whose mission is to educate Americans about the nuclear enterprise and strategic deterrence. So what is it, one of the things that I think many people are interested in is to know the exact difference between ANWA and the Heritage Foundation or Brookings or CSIS. What makes ANWA different and unique?
I think in each of those that you named, they cover a large number of different issues. We're pretty singularly focused on strategic nuclear deterrence. I think we bring a opportunity that really have access, and with all due respect to those, they do as well. But by going virtual, really have access to us, including for congressional staff. So that's been a main focus of what we've tried to do is make sure that we are very available to congressional staff. I'm sure those other entities are as well. So I don't know, Jeff, you might have some other things to offer.
I think that pretty well covers it.
And so many people will always ask the question, how is an organization funded? And so how is ANWA structured and who funds the organization?
Very good. And again, this information is available on our website. We have members, corporate, academic, and other organizations that are members of ANWA Deterrence Center, organizational members. And so they help provide our funding to allow us to do the educational programming. These funds come to us as, again, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and so we apply these funds so that we can continue to do these types of programs. We do also have sponsors of some of our series of forums. And so between the memberships and the sponsorships, that's how we are able to keep it going, and we really appreciate it. Thank you to our members and sponsors.
And I think because of our unique 501c3 status, we're able to bring in some of our national laboratories who have been tremendous supporters of what we're trying to accomplish through the Deterrence Center. And even in this program today, on bringing on yourself, Adam, and in the NucleCast, we have Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, as well as the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and of course Los Alamos National Laboratory are among our key national labs that have supported us.
So as you think about the next 12 months, the next 5 years, and then the long term, what is it that you're hoping to accomplish through ANWA DC?
I think making a much more literate America when it comes to strategic nuclear deterrence. Part of when we stood up ANWA Deterrence Center, again, it was focused towards Capitol Hill. Part of why we decided to launch NucleCast, and thanks so much for helping make that happen. That what we wanted to do was really make this available to across America and really much more accessible. So that again, we're not the final word on it. We're the beginning. We're the place where you can get some of the initial information, tremendous information. We've had a wealth of just incredible experts that have joined us and provided so much fantastic information. But it's a place to begin the conversation and then go and find some of those books and reports and other information to help. Again, build that literate country when it comes to strategic nuclear deterrence. I think it's something. If you look and see what China's doing right now, what Russia's doing right now, what other countries are doing, really building up a strong, modern strategic nuclear deterrence. And again, as Jeff mentioned earlier, we were kind of coasting on what we had built before, and unfortunately, when it comes to national security, if you don't continue to modernize, you'll find yourselves behind and placing yourself and your allies at risk.
And I think if there's to add to what David said is, I think if you're going to have a takeaway from our forums, is that we need to stay on course. We need to modernize. We need to replace Ohio's with Columbia. We need to replace our aging bomber fleet with the B-21, and then of course we need Sentinel. Our ground-based strategic nuclear deterrent needs to be modernized, as well as our nuclear command and control communications. You can tune into our forums on that front and see chapter and verse why we need to modernize. We're still dealing with some systems that are pretty antiquated, to say the least. And then, of course, the NNSA, the warheads. We need to extend the life of our warheads, but we also need modern facilities that are safer and more efficient. And I would say two things. We need to make sure that we drive the modernization given what we're seeing with China and Russia in a more accelerated fashion. We can't rest on our laurels and do things the way we've done things in the past. So I think we're going to try to address those topics, even go a little bit deeper. How can we accelerate this mission to get to modernization on time or even ahead of schedule?
So as you look into the future, we all have aspirational goals. And as you look aspirationally forward and think about where ANWA is placed and what it will be doing, and where do you see the organization, 5 years from now?
No, it's certainly something we think about. We certainly hope we're continuing to do the educational type program that we're doing today. We're hoping NucleCast is listened to by thousands every week, and
millions,
and that's
millions, not thousands.
Millions. Your aspirations are stronger than mine. I need to catch up with you. My apologies. Millions, millions.
Perhaps
thousands
we'll challenge
really
Joe Rogan one day.
Yes. Thousands would be very good across the country, because those individuals, again, are talking to their neighbors and their family and so forth. So it has a cascading effect into building that literacy. We're not sitting on our laurels. I mean, Jeff and I and the team here are constantly looking like NucleCast and what to get that going. And that, we're happy that's launched, and we're happy, where it's going where it's going. But we're already looking at what are the other types of things we can be doing to really make sure we can support through education in so many different places. So we're looking, it's, I guess, more transactional, with the types of things we're thinking about doing is, can we be involved in more conferences, or maybe in the creation of seminars, workshops, or conferences. So we're exploring that. We're trying to see where we best fit in to help make that happen. But I think it all goes back to it's always expanding. Can we reach more Americans? But it's always been, our goal has been that educational piece. And I don't think it really changes. I think our aspirations are, can we reach more people, and can we make our nation more literate, really have champions, as we have had up on Capitol Hill, more than we have now. We have many, but we need more. And so I think continuing that goal of educating Americans, I think we'll continue to do that, but we're certainly thinking about how can we expand that to reach more people.
It's a great challenge. I've spent most of my career, as a professor within the professional military education system, teaching airmen, mostly about nuclear operations and nuclear deterrence. And, for a service that's primarily, they own two of the three legs of the triad, you'd be amazed at how many airmen really don't know much about the strategic nuclear deterrence. So therefore, it's in many respects understandable that Americans and members of Congress, who have many, many other competing issues that they have to think about and that they have to worry about, that strategic deterrence is not, on their mind 24/7. And so that's what I think NucleCast is here for. That's what ANWA DC is here for, is to help inject that thought and that understanding, particularly as we face, a very challenging future with a revanchist Russia and certainly an assertive and aggressive China. And so it's a noble mission you gentlemen have taken on yourselves. I don't think that we will be calling you Don Quixote anytime soon. I don't think you're tilting at windmills. It's certainly a noble effort, and we appreciate it. For those of us who have spent our careers working on this, we're certainly glad you're here, and we appreciate your effort to educate and grow the knowledge, particularly on Capitol Hill and in the country writ large. So we appreciate that. So thanks for coming
Adam,
on the show.
Adam, let me just say thank you back to you from both Jeff and me. I mean, when we first started having this idea, that three of us were talking about, what about a podcast? And that's going back maybe even a year ago or so now. And what's it going to take? And you've really turned this into a great thing. And we're so appreciative, and we're just so happy with how many more people we're now reaching through NucleCast. So thank you very much.
The great, you're doing with us. The saddest thing about podcasting that you lose in, from being, in the same room, is you can't do a group hug on a podcast. So we can't, our Mutual Admiration Society can't have a giant group hug. So, that I'm truly disappointed.
Next time we see you in person.
Oh, well,
next time we see you.
I'll hold you to that. I'm going to expect a hug.
It's funny. David and I were first talking about this. We said we got to get Adam. I know he, I don't think our audience knows this, but Adam is a longtime DJ. I don't know whether it's North Central or South Alabama. Is that right?
It was West Alabama, technically. So, what's funny is my initial aspiration. I've never told the listeners this, and I occasionally do this, is I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. And I pitched the idea to my wife, and she was like, "No, you've got to get a real job. That's not a real job." So I went from desiring to be a comedian to focusing on strategic deterrence. It's a natural fit. So
I think the nation has benefited from your chosen avocation. So thanks to your wife, and thanks for everything you're doing.
Okay, well, with that, we are, of course, out of time on this edition of NucleCast. So I want to thank my guests, Jeff Crater and David Cherington, the founders and the fearless leaders of the ANWA Deterrence Center. Thanks for coming on the show.
Until next time.
Thank you.